After driving nearly 10 hours to attend my little sister's wedding, I was stopped at the entrance by my own mother. She looked at me like I was a stranger. Then she said a sentence I can still remember word for word. "Your name isn't on the guest list." I thought she was joking. I'd missed 2 vacations. I'd sent more than $20,000 to help pay for the wedding. I'd driven across 3 states just to be there for the most important day of my sister's life. And now I was standing in the parking lot, holding a $3,000 wedding gift, while security had orders not to let me inside. I didn't understand what was happening. Not until I saw who was sitting in the front row. That was the moment I realized a painful truth. For 10 years, my family had never really seen me as a daughter. I was just a walking wallet, and that day, for the first time in my life, I decided to close it. My name is Maya Calloway. I'm a Chief Petty Officer in the United States Navy, stationed in Norfolk, Virginia. I'm 39 years old. I drive a truck that needs new shocks, and until fairly recently, I was the person my entire family called when something went wrong. Broken furnace, car note behind, hospital bill, security deposit short. I was always the answer. I told myself it was because I loved them. That was half true. The other half was something I didn't have language for yet. My sister Brooke is 9 years younger than me. She's always been the soft one, the one who cried at commercials and collected handwritten notes and needed someone to walk her to the first day of every new chapter of her life. I was that someone. I walked her to kindergarten. I helped her move into her first apartment. When she called me 2 years before the wedding to tell me she'd met Tyler Reese and was completely sure about him, I cried happy tears in a supply closet at my command because I loved her that much. So when she sent the save the date, I started planning immediately. Getting leave from the Navy is not a simple thing. My division was short 3 people already. My chief warrant officer made it clear that approvals were tight and favors were not being handed out. I filed the request 6 weeks early, documented everything, went back 3 times when it stalled. I eventually got 8 days cleared. I want you to understand what that cost me in political capital and lost sleep, because it's relevant to what happens next. The drive down was fine until about the Georgia border, when my left shoulder started aching from gripping the wheel, and my gas station coffee stopped working. I ate a granola bar somewhere near Brunswick that tasted like cardboard and optimism. I was tired and sweaty and genuinely, honestly happy. I had a silk wrap dress in a garment bag in the back seat, and a card in my purse that I'd written 4 drafts of before getting the words right. My mother was waiting in the parking lot. She must have been watching for me. When she said those words, "close family event," I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I did something stranger. I laughed. One short, involuntary sound, like my body had released pressure from a valve it didn't know was open. "Mom," I said slowly. "I just drove 10 hours. "We know," she said. "It's just that Brooke wanted something intimate." I looked past her. Through the tall white columns of the Palmetto Grand. Through the open glass doors. There were at least 120 people inside. There was a jazz quartet. There were waitstaff moving through the crowd like choreography. There were white gardenias everywhere, the expensive kind. The kind that cost 3 times what the silk roses cost. And I knew that because I had helped my mother pay for enough crises over the years to become accidentally fluent in florist pricing. Intimate. My father appeared beside her. He put his hand on her arm rather than looking at me. "Rachel," he said, and then caught himself. "Maya, don't make this difficult. Don't make this difficult." As if arriving were the offense. I looked through the crowd for Brooke. I found her near the staircase. She was wearing a gown that probably took months to choose, and she looked genuinely beautiful, the kind of beautiful that makes your chest ache a little because you've known that face since it was 7 years old. She was laughing at something Tyler said. The room was full of people celebrating her. She glanced up. Our eyes met. I watched her face do something complicated. Then she looked away. Back to Tyler. Back to the room. Back to everything that wasn't me. That was the moment that undid me. Not my mother's folded arms. Not my father's cowardice. Brooke looking away. Like I was a stranger who had stumbled into the wrong event. Like 9 hours and 6 weeks of leave paperwork and 4 drafts of a handwritten card meant nothing at all. I remember thinking about the purple backpack. When Brooke was 5, she refused to start kindergarten. Complete shutdown. My mother was exhausted and my father had just started a new job and couldn't take time off. And I was 16 and somehow became the solution, which was the role I'd been drifting into for years without anyone officially handing it to me. I walked her to school every single morning that first semester. I held her hand up until the classroom door, let go only when she was ready. I saved up from babysitting money and bought her a purple backpack with a little silver zipper because she'd seen one in a store window and whispered that it was the most beautiful thing she'd ever seen. I did not tell our parents I bought it. It was just something I did. She carried that backpack for 3 years. Standing outside the Palmetto Grand with gardenia perfume drifting out the open doors, I thought about that backpack and I felt something older than anger, something that had been accumulating quietly for a long time. My mother cleared her throat. There's a live stream link in the family group chat. You can still see everything. I looked at her. I really looked at her. And I said 2 words. Got it. Then I walked back to my truck. Nobody followed me. No one called my name. No one ran across the parking lot. I climbed into the driver's seat and sat with my hands on the wheel and the engine off and watched a family with 3 kids walk past laughing, and a woman in a coral sundress, hurrying toward the entrance carrying a wrapped box. And life just continuing forward like it always does when something is broken in you. Honestly, I don't know how I didn't fall apart right there. And I want to say to anyone watching this who has ever sat alone in a parking lot holding the wreckage of something they worked hard to have, it's okay that you stayed quiet. Sometimes quiet is the only dignified response to something that small and that enormous at the same time. I drove 40 minutes north and stopped at a truck stop near the I-95 interchange. The place smelled like diesel and fried chicken and fluorescent lighting. I bought a coffee I didn't want. I sat in my truck and watched my phone light up with wedding photos from the family group chat. Brooke smiling. Tyler lifting her hand. Someone's cousin I barely knew giving a toast. Heart emojis. Multiple heart emojis. Not one person typed my name. I opened a new text to Brooke. Wrote something. Deleted it. Wrote something else. Deleted that too. What was the point? If she wanted me there, she knew where I was. She always knew where I was. I drove home the next morning. 9 hours and 40 minutes back. The granola bar wrapper was still on the passenger seat. 12 days later, I was in the middle of a supply audit at my command when my phone buzzed. My mother's name on the screen. First contact since the wedding. Not an apology. Not a how are you. Not even a weather-related opener. First thing she said, there's a balance on the venue that didn't clear. I set my pen down. What kind of balance? The final payment. The venue called and said the card on file was declined. A pause. Your name is on the paperwork, Maya. As a backup. I'm going to tell you what I felt in that moment, because it matters. My first reaction was not anger. It was a cold, specific fear, the kind you feel when something is wrong in a way you can't immediately see the shape of. Mom, I never signed anything for Brooke's wedding. Your family, she said, as if that answered it. How much? She exhaled like I was wasting her time. $26,000. The fluorescent lights above me hummed. Somewhere outside the office, someone was reversing a forklift. $26,000. For a wedding I watched through a phone screen in a truck stop parking lot. I'm not paying, I said. The words came out quieter than I expected. She did not take that well. I won't replay the full conversation. What matters is that by the end of it, she had confirmed there was a financial document with my name on it. She had claimed she didn't know what that document contained, and she had said in a tone that would have genuinely worked on me 5 years earlier. You always come through, Maya. That's who you are. That sentence. I called the venue the moment we hung up. The events coordinator, a woman named Patricia, had the careful voice of someone who has navigated many uncomfortable conversations. She confirmed everything. My full legal name. My military email address. A scanned copy of my government-issued ID. And an electronic signature on the final payment guarantor agreement. Can you send me the document right now? I said. Not a question. The PDF arrived 5 minutes later. I opened it at my desk. I read every line. And then I looked at the signature. It was almost right. It was close enough that someone who didn't know me wouldn't catch it. But I always curl the bottom of my capital M into a small double loop. It's an unconscious thing, a habit from the way my 3rd grade teacher taught cursive. I've done it for 30 years. I don't think about it, my hand just does it. The M on that document was a single loop. I sat very still for a long time. Because here's the thing about that detail. A careless forger doesn't study your handwriting. A careless forger scrawls something approximate and hopes no one looks close. But someone had looked at my signature, had tried to copy it. had gotten almost everything right and missed one small, personal thing. That's not impulse. That is deliberate, planned, considered. I felt sick in a way that had nothing to do with the money. I forwarded the document to my personal email, then my phone, then a USB drive I kept in my desk. Then I called the florist, then the caterer. Same forged signature on the addendum that listed me as secondary responsible party. The photographer had an email thread where my sister wrote, in plain text, "My sister Maya handles our family's financial emergencies. She's career Navy, very reliable. She'll be the backup on the final payment." Very reliable. I stared at that phrase until it blurred. My couch is secondhand. I meal prep on Sundays because otherwise I eat crackers over the sink like a person with no self-respect. I drive a truck with 200,000 miles on it because I pay off my debts first and everything else second. Very reliable. I had become, in my own sister's words, a financial instrument with a heartbeat. The next morning I was at the Navy Legal Service office when they unlocked the door. The attorney assigned to me was Lieutenant Commander Sarah Pratt. She was maybe 34, precise in the way people get when they've been trained to find the exact weight of every word. She read through my documents without interrupting. That kind of quiet from a lawyer feels like being told to hold your breath. When she finished the first contract, she tapped the signature line. "You're saying this is not yours. It's not mine. And you authorize no one. Your sister? Your mother? No one to sign on your behalf. No one." She nodded once. "Then you need to treat this as identity misuse and potentially forgery." She said it the way you say the weather. Forgery. The word sat there between us like something dropped. I looked down at my hands. There was a paper cut on my index finger from the printing. Such a small, dumb detail. But I remember it because it burned. "What if I just paid it?" I said. "To make it go away?" She looked at me for a moment. Not unkindly. "You can do that. But it creates a legal precedent of acceptance. And it doesn't address the identity theft." Identity theft. Another word that felt too large for the people I was describing. I kept picturing Brooke in her gown, laughing near the staircase. The image would not stop playing. I didn't pay it. Over the next 2 weeks, I called every vendor. I filed a formal dispute with each one. I locked my credit at all 3 bureaus. I changed passwords. I filed an identity theft report. I kept a spiral notebook with every phone call log, date, time, name of the person I spoke to, what was said. 20 years of supply chain management will do that to a person. I could build an audit trail in my sleep. The florist remembered me right away. "Oh yes, your sister mentioned you'd be handling final costs." Handling. Like I'd offered to carry something. The caterer's manager said, almost apologetically, "We did think it was unusual that the guarantor wasn't present at the consultation." I thanked him and hung up, and sat in my truck in the parking lot eating a gas station sandwich that I could not taste. The document trail was damning. Every vendor, same signature, same scanned ID, same carefully worded language about Sister Maya's military stability. Someone had built a small financial architecture on my name, and they'd been planning it long enough to get organized. Then Patricia from the Palmetto Grand called back. "Miss Calloway, I found something else in the file." Her voice had changed. Less professional, more human. "The recovery email attached to the electronic signature account. It isn't yours." "Whose is it?" She read it to me. My sister's first name. Her new married last name. Already built into the address before the wedding had even happened. I was standing barefoot in my kitchen when she said it. The tile was cold. Through my window I could hear a lawnmower, someone's kids on a bike, birds, Saturday morning sounds, normal sounds. Inside my kitchen, everything my sister had ever been to me rearranged itself quietly into something I didn't have a name for yet. I believed there was an explanation. I wanted one. I drove 9 hours towards someone who turned away from me. And some part of me was still holding space for the possibility that this was chaos, not calculation. This closed that door. 2 days later, an unknown number called. I almost let it go. I didn't. "Maya?" A man's voice. Careful. "Yes. This is Tyler. Tyler Reese. Brooke's your sister's husband." I sat down on the edge of my couch. He spoke slowly, the way people speak when they're not sure yet what the ground is under them. "I need to ask you something. Did you choose not to come to the wedding?" I asked him to tell me what he'd been told. He said it clearly. Brooke told him I didn't support the marriage, that I'd declined the invitation because I disapproved of him, that it was a long-standing tension between us. He said she'd cried when she told him. He said he'd believed her completely. I opened my photo gallery. The time-stamped photo I'd taken from the Palmetto Grand parking lot was still there. The white columns, the entrance, the jazz quartet visible through the glass, the date and time burned into the metadata. I sent it without a word. Then the screenshot of the livestream link. Then my mother's text. Family members only, honey. Watch online. I started driving while we talked. He was quiet for a long time after the photos landed. She lied, he said. Flat. Hollow. I didn't answer. He already knew. Over the next hour, Tyler told me things that settled into my chest like stones. He had paid for half the wedding from his savings. His parents had contributed. Brooke had assured them she would handle the remaining vendor balances through family support. Every time he'd asked which family member was covering what, she'd said the same thing. Maya will handle the final bills. She always does. She won't mind. He had accepted that because it was consistent. Because it was always the same name. He had no reason to doubt it. He forwarded me an email Brooke had sent him 3 weeks before the wedding. Short? Casual? One line that I read 4 times at a red light. Don't stress the florist invoice, Maya will cover the back half. She always handles it. Always handles it. 3 words that contain my whole life. I told Tyler about the forged documents. About the scanned ID. About the signature I recognized as not quite mine. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, there was a long silence. She used my license too, he said quietly. And I realized that for the first time, I was not alone in the accounting. The meeting happened 3 weeks later, on a Sunday afternoon at my Aunt Nadine's house in Macon. She's 73, barely 5 feet tall, with a voice that carries further than it has any right to, and a porch with wind chimes that she refuses to take down, even when she claims the sound annoys her. I arrived 12 minutes early. Military habit, you get there, before anyone else, so you can collect yourself. I needed those 12 minutes. Aunt Nadine opened the door before I knocked. No speech. Just pulled me into a hug that lasted about 4 seconds longer than most hugs do. You holding up? She asked. Working on it, I said. She nodded. Good enough. Inside. My mother, my father, Brooke, Tyler, 2 cousins, Nadine's daughter. A plate of butter cookies in the center of the table. Nobody was eating them. The room went quiet when I walked in. Brooke was staring at the table. Tyler sat beside her with a careful distance between them. My mother's arms were folded, that same posture. Always that same posture. The one that meant her mind was made up. I took my seat, set my folder down, said nothing. My mother spoke first. She always does. Maya has never responded well to family pressure. I want everyone to know that before this gets. I have documentation, I said. I did not raise my voice. I did not say it with heat. I just said it. She stopped. My father looked at the wall. I started at the beginning. The leave request. The drive. The parking lot. The live stream link. The phone call 12 days later. The forged signature. The scanned ID. The vendor emails. Tyler's evidence. All of it, in order, supported by paper. Every time my mother started to interrupt, I slid another document across the table. Not angrily, methodically. The way you conduct an inventory. Brooke cried. Quietly, then harder. My mother put a hand on her arm. I noted both things and kept talking. When I reached the part about the driver's license, the part where I explained that someone had provided my personal government-issued ID to be scanned into a fraudulent contract, the room got very still. I looked at my mother. She looked back at me for a long time, long enough that I could see the things she was trying to decide. Then she said, in a voice that had dropped below its usual register, I sent her your information. I thought she needed it for vendor verification. Nobody spoke for 30 seconds. My father closed his eyes. Tyler leaned back in his chair. One of my cousins set down her coffee mug very carefully. Mom, I said, you gave her my ID to forge my name. I didn't know she would. You gave her the ID. She didn't answer, because there was no answer that worked. Aunt Nadine stood up. She walked to an old oak cabinet by the window, opened the second drawer, and took out a small address book. The paper kind, worn at the corners. She put on her reading glasses, flipped through it without hurrying. Brooke, she said. Last June, you borrowed $8,000 from me. You said your car needed transmission work and you might lose your job if you couldn't get to it. Brooke looked up. Her face changed. Was there car trouble? Nadine asked. Brooke said nothing, which was the answer. Nadine closed the book. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to ruin anything. I also didn't want to be dramatic. She glanced at my mother when she said that last word, very deliberately. But since we're here, and then, one by one, they came. One cousin who had lent her $1,200 for a medical bill that never materialized. Nadine's daughter, $300 for a deposit, never paid back, never mentioned again. Small amounts, separate incidents, but laid out in a room together, the shape they made was unmistakable. A pattern. My name at the center of it, but the pattern wider than just me. I looked at my sister. She was not a monster. That was what made it complicated. She was a frightened woman who had built a life on the assumption that emergencies were transferable, that the people who loved her would absorb what she couldn't carry, that consequences had other addresses. She had never stopped to ask whether that was fair because nobody had ever made her. I spoke carefully. I'm not your emergency fund. The room was quiet. I'm not your backup plan. Brooke started crying harder. And I am not the sister you exclude until a bill shows up. My mother started to respond. My father put a hand on her arm. Tyler looked at Brooke for a long moment. Then he said, very quietly, I think we need some time apart. Brooke flinched like she'd been touched somewhere bruised. Nobody argued. Because the room understood why. I walked out onto Aunt Nadine's porch as the sun began to lower. The wind chimes were moving. The air smelled like late summer and cut grass and old Georgia evenings. I stood there for a while and felt the particular weight of a story that has finally been told out loud to the people who were inside it. Not relief, not victory. Something quieter, like a room that has been holding its breath for a very long time, finally exhaling. If you have ever been the person everyone relied on and no one protected, I want to say this directly to you. The moment you stop absorbing consequences for other people is not the moment the family falls apart. It is the moment you find out which parts of it were real. The legal process took 3 months. The disputed charges were removed from my record. My credit recovered. The identity theft report stayed on file. Lieutenant Commander Pratt sent me an email when the last vendor confirmation came through. I printed it and put it in the notebook. The notebook that had started as documentation and ended up feeling like something closer to proof that I existed, that I'd shown up, that the story happened. I moved into a smaller apartment in October. Most people would have called it a downgrade. I called it accurate. It was what I needed, not what looked impressive. The balcony overlooked a row of sweet gum trees. I bought a used rocking chair for $30 from an older gentleman down the block who was moving to assisted living. I adopted a dog named Chester, a 12-year-old basset hound mix from the county shelter, who moved approximately as fast as I felt and had the most permanently sorrowful face I had ever seen on an animal who was clearly very happy. We suited each other. My mother texted through the fall. At first the messages looked familiar. Guilt, obligation, passive correction. I responded in writing only. Short and factual. A boundary only works when you stop renegotiating it. And for the first time in my life, I didn't renegotiate. The messages eventually grew shorter, then quieter, then occasional. My father called twice. Both conversations were short and awkward in the way conversations are, when a man has spent decades pretending that not engaging is the same as not choosing. Near the end of the second call, he said something I had not expected. I should have said something. At the venue, I looked out the window at the sweet gum trees. A kid was riding a bike past on the sidewalk. Everything normal and continuing. I know, Dad, I said. Neither of us said more. We didn't need to. I started therapy in November. I want to say that clearly, because I kept putting it off for years with the logic that I was managing fine, which is the thing people say when they have learned to confuse management with health. My therapist said something in our 4th session that I still think about. She said, "You learned that being needed was proof of being loved." She wasn't wrong. I had been performing usefulness as a love language for so long that I had forgotten usefulness and love are not the same category. One of them requires something of you. The other just holds you. In late November, my phone rang on a Tuesday evening while Chester and I were sitting on the balcony. Brooke. I almost let it go. Then I answered. We didn't talk for long. She was quiet at the start in a way that felt different from her usual quiet, less performance, more actual weight. She said she was sorry. Not with a list of qualifications. Not with a pivot to her own suffering. Just, I'm sorry. I should have asked you. I was scared. and I made it your problem instead of my own. I asked her what she was scared of. She said, being ordinary, being the one who needed help, being seen as less capable than the sister she'd always watched. I sat with that for a long time. That was the part I hadn't expected. The jealousy not of my things or my career, but of my reputation for surviving, of the fact that people trusted me with hard things. She had experienced that as something that made her feel smaller, and she had handled that feeling by making herself larger at my expense. I understood it. I didn't excuse it, but I understood it. We talked for maybe 15 minutes. When we said goodbye, I told her I hoped she was okay. That was all. No promises, no reconciliation plan, no map back to the way things were. Just, I hope you're okay, and I meant it, which surprised me. Sitting on that balcony later with Chester warm against my leg and the sweet gum leaves catching the last of the light, I thought about all the different things I used to think winning would feel like. I thought it would be loud. I thought it would feel like a door slamming, like an argument ended, like a moment so clean and final that you could point to it and say, that was the turning point. It didn't feel like that. It felt like sleeping through the night. It felt like opening my bank account and not bracing for what I'd find. It felt like answering my phone without rehearsing. It felt like understanding slowly, incompletely, but genuinely, that love and access are not the same thing. That people who have truly loved me have never needed to be my only priority to feel it. The mistake most of us make is assuming that the people who take the most from us are the ones who need us most. Sometimes they're just the ones who learned earliest that you wouldn't say no. What this story taught me is that the moment you start saying it clearly, without apology, without softening the edges, you don't become someone who loves less. You become someone who finally knows what their love is actually worth. Ask yourself this, and sit with it honestly. Is there someone in your life right now whose need for you has never once been reciprocal? And if the answer is yes, what would it cost you, really, to let them solve their own next problem? I would love to know where you stand on this one. If you think I was right to dispute the charges and cut off contact, comment the number 1. If you think I should have found a middle path, some way to address the fraud without involving legal proceedings, comment 2. And if you've been in a situation like this yourself and you made a different choice than I did, comment 3. I want to hear from you. I genuinely do. Also, where are you watching from? What time is it there? I post these stories for people in every time zone, and I always find it remarkable that someone in a completely different part of the world is sitting with something this familiar. And if this story stayed with you, if it named something you've been living but couldn't quite describe, please consider subscribing. I tell these stories because I believe they matter. Because sometimes the most important thing you can hear is that someone else was standing in that parking lot too, and they made it to the other side. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional experiences, fully rewritten and reimagined in Norfolk, Virginia and Savannah, Georgia to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is coincidental.